we might have access to billions of tokens, but maybe only a few hundred of these labels, or maybe none of these labels. So I know this is something that you talk a lot about in your book. Would you mind sharing some of your favorite strategies for tackling this common NLP problem?
Sure. And this was, I think, born out of pain, basically. I mean, there's a pain that you have when you're a data scientist, trying to solve a business problem with little label data. Um, so I'll tell you the way we kind of did it in the book, and then I'll tell you a little bit about what's changed since I think the advent of ChatGPT and GPT-4, which for me personally have kind of made me rethink a little bit how I would tackle this. So the first one is if you've got like no label data, and this can be relatively common, especially for extractive tasks like named entity recognition or question answering, because the price of labeling the data is quite a lot. There aren't a huge amount of tools available yet for tackling those kind of tasks. And for there, you might be better off just going for a generative model like GPT-4 or ChatGPT and saying, hey, here are a few examples of what I'm trying to do. So this so-called like few shot prompting. Can you please, now complete the final task? And these generative models are quite good at following those types of instructions. But if you're doing something that is more like, say, text classification, then there's far more tools available for this. So, for example, in the Transformers library, we have zero-shot pipelines or zero-shot classification pipelines. And what these pipelines do is they basically formulate the classification task as a sort of what's called an NLI task, or a natural language inference task, where you take the context, which is the thing you're trying to classify. You have a sentence that is like a template to say, is this positive or negative? And then you get the model to fill in the third part of that sequence. And this personally has always been like a good baseline. You just run this. It's like 2 lines of code. You run it over your data set. It gives you a rough idea of where you are. But then if you want to go beyond that, probably the sort of 2 approaches I would recommend. One is called SetFit. It's a technique I developed with researchers at Intel. And this is called sentence transformer or few-shot learning for sentence transformers. And essentially, we showed that you can classify documents across different domains with usually around 8 to 16 examples per class. And you get results that are fairly comparable to training on the full data set. And this, as I mentioned, it works well for text classification. But if you want to go beyond that, then there are these other techniques called parameter efficient fine-tuning techniques. And here the idea is to use a transformer like T5, which I discussed briefly, is kind of a general purpose transformer that can solve many tasks. And then you try to basically prompt it in a certain way so that, if you've only got a couple of labeled examples, you can still solve the question answering task in a fairly efficient way. And so I would say those are like the sort of 2 main things I would recommend. But today, seriously, using these large language models is also, if you don't have security concerns with your data because of your company, just testing the API is often a good start, I would say.